What is going on? Class is back in session, guys. Here with another sort of analysis video to try to kind of figure out the format and take down the most, I would say one of the most represented decks and probably the big elephant in the room of BT11, that is going to be BLACKWARGREYMON X. So I want to preface this by saying I'm not actually sure when this video is going to come out. I want to get it done and everything by Nationals, but just because it's been really busy for me recently, I'm not actually sure when that's going to happen. But regardless, BLACKWARGREYMON X is still going to be a really prominent deck, unless of course it gets neutered on the ban list or something. But anyways, so without further ado, let's get into it, guys. So I think the most effective strategy for dealing with a BLACKWARGREYMON, probably the easiest way, is going to be the ability to attack unsuspended stacks. So this naturally means that BLACKWARGREYMON itself is a good counter to its deck. Metal Greymon is one hell of a card. Being able to attack unsuspended with the Dragonkin or Machine traits is really powerful. Savior Huck is another prominent example. Jessmon, I think, is a really strong counter to BLACKWARGREYMON. Being able to, when Digivolve, this Digimon may attack unsuspended Digimon for the turn, being able to simultaneously out their board as well as put up your Sistermons. Marsmon is a newcomer, the raid keyword, as far as ways to out the stack of BLACKWARGREYMON, because it will most likely have the reboot keyword if they have the BLACKWARGREYMON X. And so being able to attack unsuspended is pretty important. And so raid inherently just lets you do that so long as you have the keyword. There's no other condition you have to meet other than just having the keyword. And at the time of recording this, again, those number of Digimons that have raid is basically just limited to the Marsmon line. But I know next set we get the Gallantmon and some other cards as well. Now, of course, the problem with this strategy being it is basically only limited to red and black decks. Machine Dramon's another example of a deck that could take advantage of this, being able to use the Metal Greymon to be able to attack unsuspended. So, of course, BLACKWARGREYMON X has no battle protection, so being able to make a really big Marsmon, really big Jessmon, stuff like that, is a really strong strategy to be able to out the boards. So, going into the next point is going to be just high DP Digimon in general. So, what do you do if you can't attack an unsuspended Digimon? Well, I would say there are other ways to deal with that. In a lot of the green decks, for example, Grandis, Quagmon, Bloom Lordmon, and Examon, those strategies can suspend your opponent's BLACKWARGREYMON X via the effect of something like Grandis, or Bloom Lord has access to the, I think it's the EX3 Palmon, either the EX3 or the BT10 one, the one that when it's suspended, it suspends something else. BLACKWARGREYMON, again, has no battle protection, and it has no protection against suspended. Well, in a sense that it's still affected by monster effects. You can't suspend it with something like Samadhi Santi, but you can suspend it with something like an Examon or a Grandis Quagmon. And because they have no battle protection, Grandis is base 16,000. If you utilize the Digiburst effect of the Yokomon, it puts it up to 18,000. There's almost no way that you're getting a stack bigger than that. Similarly, Bloom Lord can boost himself to 14k if you've got another suspended Digimon on field, including himself. So that's another way to be able to out the board of BLACKWARGREYMON. Examon's a really hard counter to BLACKWARGREY, so that's a deck that's not red, blue, green. In fact, that has a lot of tools at his disposal to be able to out the board of BLACKWARGREYMON. Of course, suspending them, attacking over, forcing the attacks, all that sort of thing. So like I said, being able to suspend their stack, clearing their board is really nice. But of course, at worst, it'll just deter them from blocking something like WarGreymon X Antibody. WarGreymon X usually has a pretty strong stack. Metal Greymon boosted by 3,000 DP, the Koromon boosted by 1,000. So you're usually looking at a base 16,000 stack when you're swinging. Sometimes it can be more if you, depending on the inheritance. But at worst, like I said, you can have a stack that is free to check security. They're not going to block because they'll waste their whole stack on it. So you can usually check 2 to 3 security, clearing another one of their stacks, or potentially threatening their stack if they do have, or potentially threatening their stack if they don't have the Metal Greymon inherited effect. or if they do, there are ways to clear it twice. One thing I do want to mention for as far as WarGreymon X goes, you do actually have the potential to clear Black WarGreymon stacks. You essentially need to just out it twice. What I mean by that is because usually if they don't have like the Alterius mode or anything, they'll have just the protection from the Greymon X. So you'll WarGreymon X, swing into their security, end of attack, delete their stack, they'll bottom deck their X antibody, and then after that you can follow it up with something like an Omnimon X to bottom deck their Black WarGreymon. So basically deleting it or bottom decking it twice. Or another thing you could do is if they have the blocker inherited, you can use the EX1 WarGreymon to blitz, on attack, delete their blocker, and then on attack evolve into WarGreymon X, and then end of attack delete their stack once again. So those are some other strategies you can definitely use. Big DP Digimon is always nice. Next thing I want to talk about is going to be special removal effects, or removal effects that don't bounce, don't bottom deck, don't delete, things that get around the Greymon X inherited effect. Of course, there's also the Metal Greymon effect to deal with as well, which is why I didn't put Digivolve as like its own slide in this presentation, because of the fact that that card prevents Digivolution and makes things like Death X a little bit less viable. Gaiomon is still a really strong card, but more of the fact for the fact that it has Blitz and it's a Dragon King, so you can like blitz over the Metal Greymon BT11 and immediately swing into an X antibody unsuspended stack that they have. But regardless, what I'm talking about is cards like Chaos Degradation as well as Bogremon. Both of these cards have very unique removal conditions. Chaos Degradation, as I'm sure a lot of you know, places it on top of the security stack, and Bogremon, a newcomer to BT11, lets you put their Black WarGreymon X underneath one of their other Digimon. Now, there are downsides to both of these cards, unfortunately. If only it was that easy as to just play Chaos Dag. While they do get around the protection effects from the Digimon, Bogremon, works through protection, but it relies on them having another Digimon in play. So it might work the first time, but after they see that you're playing the Bogremon, or if they know you're playing Bogra Army or something like that, or any purple deck really, they'll probably anticipate it to where they won't put multiple things on board for you to be able to utilize Bogremon's effect. So if they only have their one stack, this effect is basically useless. Similarly, Chaos Deck is stopped by their Yuya. If they did Yuya in the previous turn, it's unaffected by option card effects. So whether they hit Insecurity or whether you play this from hand, it won't have any effect. And if you're playing a card like Chaos Deck, you're most likely playing Security Control or Mastamon. So in those slower paced matchups, they can usually utilize Yuya 2 to 3 times per stack, being able to use it like every single time they Digivolve on top of their Digimon to the same level. So definitely has their downsides, but these cards are still overall really strong. The next thing I want to talk about is going to be tempo/rush. So despite a deck like Crossheart and despite a deck like Metal Garurumon being very heavily unfavored into the Black WarGreymon matchup, these decks are still very consistent and very high pace. Decks that can consistently do 1 to 2 damage between turn 2 can often outpace Black WarGreymon. Usually, let's say you're going first in Cross, you're evolving a rookie and playing a Taiki, you're playing a Tamer. So because of that, you'll next turn promote, swing, draw a card, and then maybe play like a Cross 3 or Cross 4, or potentially you had played like a Shoutmon the previous turn. So a lot of times, if you can punish them for not drawing their perfect stack, for not drawing their rookie, or all the different pieces they need, because they definitely do need some time to set up, you can often outpace them to where once they make their stack, okay, now they have an unoutable Black WarGreymon stack, but you kind of don't care, and you'll kind of just end up going for security. Something like Crossheart can just put up a bunch of Digimon, and if your opponent can't out it, then well, they're going to lose all their security in the following turn. Metal Garurumon is a little bit harder just because it is a 1-stack deck, so usually you spend like 2 turns making like a single stack. However, there are this deck is still really consistent. Cool Boy's still a 4. Of course, at the time of making this video, Cool Boy's still a 4. You got 4 Memory Boost, Davis, etc. So a lot of times you can turn 2 or turn 3 push out a stack, check like 3 or 4 security, and then bounce something with the Metal Garurumon X, and then if they don't have their stack established, they really need to out your board immediately, otherwise they just lose the game. Another thing you can do is what I've seen some source stripping cards, stuff like Sorai, being played into the Metal Garurumon deck to be able to get rid of the Greymon X antibody to prevent it from bounce protection. So that's another tech you can kind of play in that deck. But often these decks are still just so fast, it's not necessarily like the fact that BLACKWARGREYMON has a good matchup doesn't guarantee it the win. A deck like Jessamon, while it isn't a rush deck per se, it can out-tempo Black War. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the sense that once you make a Jessamon stack, like let's say you go into your Jessamon, you blitz, and then you're usually going to be outing their stack and putting out like 3 to 4 bodies in a single turn. So like you'll usually like Jessamon swing into their guy, Jessamon's effect play Sistermon, Savior Hook play Sistermon, maybe you go into Jessamon GX off of that, uses effects, Stink Genku underneath, play another Sistermon. So you're simultaneously outing their board, and then potentially, maybe if you're piercing or something, I don't know. But regardless, you're outing their board and you're putting up a bunch of blockers, Digimon that can't easily be like bottom decked or DP reduced or whatever Genku's protection is. And then you've got a big reboot blocker if you've got the right setup. To where like next turn they're gonna be building back on their breeding again, but then you've got like 5 bodies on field that you can just usually go for a game anyway. So a deck like Jessamon has really explosive like single turns. Grandis is kind of like this too, where like you'll just push out your stack, clear like 2 full stacks because you're suspending and unsuspending. You're suspending their guys, attacking over with piercing, and then you'll just clear their board and clear out their security to where even if they like out your stack, you're in such a good position anyways, you're probably going to win within the next turn or two anyways. So decks like this I still think do have a really good time into BLACKWARGREYMON. And then I think this is the last thing I want to talk about is going to be, or actually second last thing, is going to be interruption cards. So this is more niche. And of course heavily depends on the deck you're playing, but a card like Mimi, for example, or even Purple Kari, lets you kind of play on your opponent's turn and lets you kind of interrupt them and limiting the amount of things they can do per turn. So Mimi basically turns X antibody into a 1-cost option. Like, and if you've got multiple Mimis, like let's say if you choke your opponent to 3, you've got like 2 to 3 Mimis on field, well you're basically getting rid of 2 to 3 memory and they can like only do one other thing for the turn. So Mimi's really good. Slayerjamon, for example, we talked about Xamon being really good. So a Slayerjamon forces their stack to attack even before they can play the X antibody. So usually they'll have like Greymon X in the breeding. If they bring that out, you immediately force it to attack during the start of their main phase before they can stick an X antibody underneath it, to where they'll basically have to like evolve into a level 6 in the breeding with like the correct inheritables, so that they can out like a single Slayerjamon. And by that point, you're probably doing really good anyways. And don't even get me started on Xamon. Xamon's a crazy control card against this. But still being able to interrupt them during their main phase as well. Emergency Program Shutdown is another card I kind of want to talk about, just because I think it is really, really cool, like in theory, but in application, it ends up not being super strong. It does have some downsides. Of course, it costs 3. You need to be running a white card, like a white Tamer or something, maybe like a Cool Boy Analog Youth or something, to be able to utilize this. But it does, in theory, turn off their Hades Force as well as the use of X antibody. So if you like, let's say you EPS and shut them down, and then you choke them to like 2 memory, and it's like, what are they gonna do? They can like go into like their level 5, but then since they can't blitz into anything, they basically have to have like a Gaiamon, or if they evolve into level 6, they'll just like pass turn, put you to like 4 or 5 memory, which you're totally fine with. So something like that can be really useful. Loathmon is another card I want to talk about because again, this card is like so good, but like it's you have to basically play this in a Bagra or a purple deck, which just unfortunately makes it like really not good. But maybe just down the road it'll end up being really strong, but it might be a little bit hard to see there. But its second effect basically reads, when an opponent's Digimon moves from the breeding area to the battle area, you can trash a card underneath its sources to give it, when attacking, lose 3 memory. So this is a similar interaction to Sakuyamon, where it like immediately checks for like something coming out of the breeding, and it's a really strong card because if you put them to 3 memory or even like less than that, like if you choke them to 1 or 2, you can just end their turn straight up if they attack. Or if they've got X antibody, like let's say they're at 3 and then they play X antibody, swing attack for 5, evolve for 5, and then put you to 2, and then you gain 3 memory off the Lilithmon. Okay, they clear your board, but you got a 5 memory, and maybe you got something else coming out breeding. So being able to interrupt them that way, I still think is really, really strong. So these cards, again, more niche, I still think are really good. And lastly, Floodgates. Venusmon's are really strong, being able to turn off X antibodies as well as the level 5 when Digivolving effects, stuff like Metal Greymon X. Doesn't really affect BLACKWARGREYMON X, but it turns off basically like any when Digivolving when attacking is really strong. And then Cutemon does make their level 5 Digimon more expensive. It basically turns off the Greymon effect, the Greymon X that lets you reduce by 2, 1 for each color. So it still makes the metal Greymons like a 4 cost basically. So it makes it your opponent's deck really inefficient. So that's cool. These decks, these cards basically you're going to be playing in like Security Controller. I don't know, maybe Lord Knight or something if you're playing that. But yeah, guys, so that is basically going to be it for the video. If you guys have any other ideas on cards that are good into the BLACKWARGREYMON matchup or strategies in general, let me know. But I think this mostly covers it. And if you'd like to see this sort of analysis for any other deck you maybe hate or want to be able to beat consistently, let me know down in the comments. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.